5.2. Any discussion either of them? Seeing none, can I have a motion then on them both? Moved by Collins, second by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. So public hearings and delegations. So we have a delegation from Katherine Menyes, Director of Watershed Management Services, Conservation Halton, respecting Conservation Halton Watershed Report Card. So I'd like to ask Katherine to come forward now and come to the podium and do your presentation.
Thank you,
Welcome
Mr.
back
Chair.
to Hamilton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Again, my name is Kathy Menyes. I'm the Director of Watershed Management Services at Conservation Halton. And thank you for having us here today. Given that the Watershed Report Card exercise is one that all the conservation authorities, all 36 of us in Ontario, have issued our report cards this year. And given that the majority of the City of Hamilton is covered under the jurisdiction of the Hamilton CA as well as Conservation Halton. A portion is within the Grand River CA and a portion is within the Niagara CA, but we thought that we would do a joint presentation with the Hamilton CA on common things that we're finding in our report cards. So Scott Peck, the Director of Watershed Planning and Engineering from the Hamilton CA, is with me today and will participate in the presentation. We also brought two of our staff, Mike Stone, the Manager of Watershed Planning Services at Hamilton, and Brenda Axon, the Manager of Watershed Planning Services at Conservation Halton, in case you have technical questions later on. With that, I'll get started. In general, conservation authorities are community-based organizations established under the Conservation Authorities Act of Ontario. Our goal is to manage the renewable natural resources of our watershed in cooperation with our municipalities, and as you know, we each report to a board of directors. As I said, we're watershed-based. The Board of Directors is made up of representatives from our local municipalities, some politicians, some citizen appointees. And as you can see, most conservation authorities are located in southern Ontario, where the greatest population in Ontario exists. There are some CAs in northern Ontario as well. Conservation Halton Watershed is shown on this map. As you can see, we're surrounding, Hamilton is surrounding the corner of Lake Ontario, and the Hamilton CA's watershed is right adjacent to us, and our two CAs work very closely together on several joint initiatives. For Conservation Halton's watershed, we have about 1,000 square kilometers and over 450,000 residents. City of Hamilton, Wellington County, the region of Halton, and the region of Peel are in our jurisdiction. We have a myriad of land uses, urban, rural, agricultural, recreational, aggregate, and transportation. We have the Niagara Escarpment in Lake Ontario and several wetlands in our headwaters, and our communities are rapidly expanding. The Hamilton CA's watershed has a smaller jurisdictional area, as you can see, 477 square kilometers, but almost the same amount of residents. The City of Hamilton and Wellington County are within their jurisdiction, and again, they have the same mix of land use, as well as some of the same challenges and natural resources to manage that we do in Halton. The programs of the conservation authorities are related to flood control, land stewardship, environmental monitoring, education, natural heritage protection, drinking water source protection, and recreation. The report card initiative was set up. Each authority does a lot of different environmental monitoring, but we decided to collectively try to issue these report cards, which are really states of the environment in our different watersheds collectively, and they're issued every 5 years, and they're a good management tool for the CAs, our member municipalities, and non-government agencies that we work with quite a bit. The monitoring we do is really helping us to identify issues, to figure out where we need to focus certain projects in the future, to track our progress over time, and really we're working with our member municipalities to create a healthy environment for all of the citizens within our jurisdictional areas. The type of monitoring that the conservation authorities do is quite extensive. We have standardized protocols and partnerships. We are implementing the monitoring that the province used to do for groundwater and surface water quality. We also do benthos biomonitoring, and that's basically, we have a lot of ecologists out in the field looking at our creeks, collecting insects to determine just what the oxygen levels are in our creeks and streams in the water. Certain invertebrates indicate good levels of oxygen and good water quality, and others indicate conditions that really aren't indicative of a healthy stream. We also have GIS mapping. I was very happy to hear about the Public Works Department here. I know the two CAs work very closely with our GIS staff at the municipality, and at the CA they do comparative mapping or comparative analysis between air photo-based mapping that might have been done 5, 10, 20 years ago to what is being seen on the ground now, to see how we're improving with respect to different types of conditions. The report cards are basically created to help create some conversations with our member municipalities, with staff. We've got, I think each of the members have a copy of each of the two CA's report cards. We try to recognize the partnerships that each CA has, and we're really trying to help people to learn how they can be part of the solution, because local initiatives really can make a difference in the watershed and can help us all deal with some global challenges facing us all. What Scott and I did was each of our report cards looks at a number of different parameters and indicators of environmental health, and we found the three that are common in our watersheds to talk to you a little bit about today. So we won't be talking about all of the parameters that were examined, but the ones that are common to both of us. With respect to surface water quality, in Conservation Halton's watershed, we have the Grindstone Creek watershed, which outlets to Hamilton Harbour. Part of the Bronte Creek watershed is also in Hamilton's jurisdiction, and I'll talk about those sub-watersheds, but I'm going to try to point on the map. This is City of Hamilton boundary generally in Conservation Halton's watershed. And as you can see with surface water quality, we've got some fairly good grades. We've got B's and C's in the watershed in the upper reaches in particular. The lower reaches, you'll see we're lacking a bit of data for some of the smaller creeks that outlet directly to Hamilton Harbour, but there are some initiatives through the Remedial Action Plan where we're looking at sediment delivery to those streams and at the quality of water as well. So we will have more information in the near future. And I'm going to let Scott talk about the Hamilton.
Thank you, Kathy. You can see with our map of our watershed from the top, our grades in our upper watershed areas are quite good. As you get down into the more urbanized areas, we have some poorer results or some lack of information that we have. As you can see, it's the Hannon, Montgomery, and Tiffany in upper watershed are receiving some poorer scores, whereas Fletcher, Logies, and Upper Spencer all received higher scores. So what we're finding, again, is that in Conservation Halton's watershed, the overall local conditions give us a grade of C. When you look at the surface water quality for the Hamilton CA, we're looking at an overall average of D, and that the best water quality is not surprisingly found in our headwaters areas, as the activities have the least impact.
Next parameter and indicator is impervious land cover, and I think you'll notice that the very urban areas of our watersheds in both our jurisdictions didn't get the best grades, and I think it's just an indicative of the fact that we have urban communities, and we are doing a lot of work at the CA. The municipalities are doing a lot of work. Local community groups are doing a lot of work to try to improve that impervious cover. The report card really is just showing us the facts so that we can move forward in the future. But the one very good thing that you can see from impervious land cover is that in the upper reaches of the watersheds, the Grindstone and the Bronte in Hamilton's jurisdiction, we have some excellent grades of A and B. We have a lot of forested areas there. We have the Hazeland Swamp and the Beverly Swamp in those areas, and all of us collectively have been doing a very good job of protecting them, and they are helping with the water quality throughout the entire sub-watersheds.
Just to piggyback on what Kathy has said, is a similar situation in the Hamilton's jurisdiction as far as the impervious land cover goes. We have excellent grades when you get up into our upper watershed and even into our mid-watershed areas of the Spencer Creek. Our poorer grades are within the areas of the more urbanized areas of urban Hamilton and Stoney Creek. What we're finding with this is that imperviousness in the Halton's watershed is 21.4%, and again it reflects the heavy urban component. As well in Hamilton's, we have a 35, which is really just over the level of what would be into a more degraded system. And again, the imperviousness is measured in terms of the ecological value and contributions to the ecosystem and function, features and function. And at the end of the day, it's the 10%, anything less than 10% represents something that's not impaired with a good habitat. As it reaches up to that 26-30%, that's when you're getting into the more degraded watersheds.
And the third indicator we're here to talk to you about is forest conditions. And as you can see in the Hamilton, City of Hamilton's jurisdiction, we have some great grades again. As I said, we're doing a great job in the upper reaches of the sub-watersheds in protecting our forests, and it's something that we'll continue to do. We have some very great healthy forests, which are good for our bird species, good for recreational opportunities for people as well. It's important to get people out into those natural areas and help them to gain a good appreciation for the natural world that is part of their urban living environment as well.
And again, just reflecting on what Kathy has said, it's the same. We have excellent conditions in our upper watershed areas, and even into though the grades are coming up as poor, into our urbanized areas, we're having some good forest conditions as well. But overall, we have a good, healthy forest conditions within our watershed, specifically into those mid to upper areas of the Spencer Creek. So what we're finding again is that there's 26.4% forest cover for the conservation Halton, which is the grade of C. For the Hamilton's jurisdiction, it's 19% for a grade of C. And then again, the forests provide many ecological benefits as well as recreational benefits, wildlife habitat, air purification, erosion control, and recreational opportunities. And again, a minimum of 30% forest cover is typically necessary to sustain species and biodiversity in a watershed.
So this is the good part. Now that we know what our grades are and what the conditions are, what can we all do to help to improve the health of our watersheds? I think I skipped one. And what can our communities and our citizens do to help as well? We want to have healthy streams on public and private land. We have a lot of landowners who own natural creek systems in the city of Hamilton. What can we do? How can we educate them? How can we ask them to help to improve the health of those streams? Simple things that all of us have already heard and seen, and many of us do. Don't mow our lawns to the edge of the creeks. Let some natural vegetation grow up on either side. Let that vegetation filter surface water draining to the creek, taking out the sediments. Let's get out there and promote the establishment of native species on public and private lands. Let's get out and support our community groups with planting and cleanup events. And City of Hamilton has many excellent non-government agencies that are out doing things like that. reduce the use of fertilizers, to reduce and manage our road salt in the urban areas to reduce the amount that's entering our streams and entering Lake Ontario. And then with Hamilton and Halton CAs, we have a joint private landowner stewardship program where we work with private citizens in rural and urban and agricultural areas to help them to implement things that on their properties to promote good land and water stewardship practices. With our heavy urban environments in the south and in the dense urban centers, there are a number of things that we can do at the conservation authorities, a number of things we can do with city staff when we're dealing with businesses in the south to when they're looking at redevelopment activities. We need to get out there and promote what we call low impact development techniques, and that's basically creating things on sites and on businesses' properties that will promote infiltration into the groundwater system, preventing a lot of that surface water runoff and the pollutants from entering our streams. And we'll be working with city staff on that in the future. New development activities. What can we do to promote the health of our environments? We can try to create green corridors and natural habitats for birds, fish, and other wildlife to live in and to thrive in. We can educate contractors about proper erosion and sediment control techniques. A number of years ago, the two CAs worked together and worked with an organization called Landscape Ontario and created a training session for contractors who will go out there and try to implement all of those engineering drawings that a number of us in the office toil over to make sure that we don't allow sediment to enter our creeks. We had training for them to make sure that those plans are implemented properly on site. We need to do more of that. We can, again, work to educate landowners as well. Many landowners in our watersheds live adjacent to natural areas. We need to talk to them and promote some good stewardship practices, making sure that people aren't dumping their swimming pool water over the valley slope and that's entering our creeks, making sure they're not dumping their lawn clippings, promoting things like streams of dreams and working with children to through the stewardship program and other programs at the CAs to encourage greening of schoolyards, and again trying to get to kids when they're young, and then also working with folks my own age as they're looking to develop new properties. Again, at the CAs we have different programs that are really working to improve the health of our watersheds. We work with our municipalities looking at land use planning, different development activities in the watersheds. We have a regulation as well where we're looking to make sure that new development doesn't impact on shorelines, waterways, and wetlands. We're promoting sustainable forest management at our own properties that the CAs own in the headwaters, both CAs. We have education programs for our young people. And again, as I said earlier, really trying to promote educational experiences and recreational experiences out in nature to help to families to gain a better appreciation for the natural environment around them. And with that, we're finished, Mr. Chair. If there are any questions, Scott and I and our staff can certainly answer them for you.
Yep, thanks, Kathy. And I do have Councillor Jackson on the list. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Kathy, good to see you again. And Scott, thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions, Kathy. It's called the riparian buffer. Yes. So can you help me understand, we've got wetlands, we've got forests, and we've got this riparian buffer, and that's a buffer, I guess, to protect wetlands. Is the buffer man-made? Is it some kind of natural environment, Mr. Chairman, that we are having to protect? Is it like a man-made lake? Help me understand that better, Mr. Chairman, through you to Kathy, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that question. In a couple other presentations, I've done a better job of explaining what they are. Riparian buffer is really a natural vegetative strip of land on either side of a creek. It is a natural area. You can do plantings in those areas too. I'll give you an example of what the Hamilton Halton Watershed Stewardship Program does. They've done a lot of work with agricultural properties where creeks are running through them, and we have some great partnerships with some farmers in both our watersheds where they have had cattle or sheep that cross those creeks and erode the creek banks. Sediment gets into the creek systems, and we've worked with them to do nothing more than fencing off a certain strip of land so many meters on either side of the creek, creating other opportunities for their livestock to get water to drink, but just leaving that fenced off area natural and letting it over time, over a few years, just regenerate. And we have some very healthy systems. As a result, a farmer has also a more aesthetically pleasing situation for himself, has better water supply for his livestock as well, and the sediment from the farm when it rains is not getting into the creeks. Now, we do this also in urban areas, situations where folks who have a creek on their property, we're just talking to them and saying, why don't you not mow the lawn so close to the edge of the creek bank? Why don't you just leave it alone? Go 2 feet back, see what you think. And in time, we can increase that area and we can really help to improve the quality of the water in that stream, which is good for our fish communities, which feed into fisheries in Lake Ontario as well.
Thanks for that description and explanation, Kathy. Second question, Mr. Chairman, to Kathy or Scott. This might be a bit of a tricky one, but it helps me at least politically. Marketing your message about naturalized areas and no use or lesser use of pesticides. So, Kathy, just quickly, back in the 90s when we kind of started a naturalization area up in my ward along King's Forest above Albion Falls, when we didn't do any cutting, Scott, I can tell you the initial few months in that summer season was mid-late 90s. Mr. Chairman, the outcry, the backlash from my constituents was enormous because they said the naturalized area was unsightly. It was vegetation growing out of control. They said it was unkept. They assumed that everything would be cut. And it all ties into with our reduction of pesticides, but the unsightliness we hear, Mr. Chairman, we've been through this at budget time, as you know, with the amount of dandelions growing and weeds growing and things like that. So from the Conservation Authority standpoint, from both of you in the collaboration in our area, how do you market that message, Scott, to our citizens in terms of those that see beautification one way when it's properly kept, maintained, controlled, cut, and yet from what you're saying from a more environmentally conscious way, things should be allowed to grow more naturally. Mr. Chairman, through to Scott possibly for a comment, you or Kathy?
I think that's a very difficult issue to market through the chair. I think what we do is through our stewardship programs and through our regulatory and planning programs, we try to communicate with the landowners that it really is a question of time a lot of the times with those naturalization issues. Because a lot of times in the first year, 2 years, 3 years, what comes up isn't necessarily all that aesthetically pleasing, but over a longer period of time, that's when you get more trees, shrubs, that sort of thing coming up into place. So a lot of the message is patience, and that it does take time for things to go from those dandelions and other things that aren't as sightly and people don't like as much, that you need a longer period of time to allow the naturalization to take place so you get the more natural species coming into play. But the biggest thing as well, I think, is just recognizing that sometimes you can't convince people that naturalization is a good thing, and I think you have to understand that you in some instances you'll convince them and they'll come on side. In other instances you won't, and I think you kind of have to come to that realization. But my biggest belief is just that it takes time for the naturalization to happen so people can see the natural beauty that does come out of those areas.
I think I'll take you with me to my next town hall meeting on this subject, Scott, and you can stand in front of me explaining it that way, please. I would appreciate that. So,
through the chair, certainly we're facing...
I'm being a little bit facetious,
No,
Scott.
I understand, but certainly we face it on our lands as well, where we have subdivisions backing on to our conservation areas, and people will come onto our land and start to cut them because they think it looks unsightly. And again, that's one of the things that we have to go to them and say why it's there for, explain the purpose of it, and try to work with them to understand the importance of those natural areas.
I appreciate the sincerity of your comments. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Pursuta next.
Thank you, Chairman Collins, and Kathy and Scott, welcome too. Just probably one question that's going to get the good answer or the wrong answer, I'm not sure, but agriculture over the years has been blamed for a lot of phosphorus and nitrates in the water and in the streams. Over the last few years, have you seen a change in that because of our farming techniques have changed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, I think there are some great improvements in the water quality, and I think that the farming community can take great pride in some of those improvements that we're seeing. And there are some wonderful things happening with different kind of cropping practices, as livestock practices. That I discussed that a little in my answer earlier. And the farming community is one of my favorite ones to deal with, as you may know. Farmers live and die by the land, and they know their land better than anyone. And our private landowner stewardship program is doing great things with the farming community, going out and walking the farms with the landowners. Oftentimes, there are a great many improvements that farmers have wanted to make for a long time, and they talk to our stewardship staff. And the private landowner stewardship program is also actually a cost-sharing program where we get grants to help implement some of these improvements that are quite costly to the farmers. So we're giving them some financial benefits, some hope to do a number of things that they've always wanted to do, but have had, competing interests in running the business of the farm. So the farming community's done great things, and I know it'll continue to.
Yeah, so the few dollars creates an incentive for farmers to do something, so it gives them a kickstart. So thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor. And I have no further questions at this point in time. Kathy and Scott, thank you again for the presentation, the information, and we look forward to seeing the progress we make through the next year. We don't have quorum right now to move the receipt of the information, but I'm going to move on to 6.2, which is a delegation from Nicholas Schwetz respecting tree health in downtown Hamilton. Is Nicholas here? Nicholas, good morning. And you have 5 minutes, sir, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I live on the corner of Lock Street in Charlton, and I spend a lot of time in downtown Hamilton. And I just put up this presentation to you today to let you know of just some observations that I've found about our street trees in Hamilton. Where did it go? So we'll start, we'll just show you the locations of where my observations were. I'll tell you specifically what's going on with these trees, the causes, the impacts to the trees themselves, the implications they have with the city of Hamilton, some opportunities that hopefully we could correct this, and also just a summary at the end. So you'll see down at the bottom there's City Hall, and I did my study on Bay Street South between King and Main, and also up King Street towards Caroline. The trees you see there are in the orange, that were specifically the ones that I looked at. So some of the street trees are not indigenous to Hamilton. Many are damaged. They have lesions at their bases. Some are displaying signs of stress because of this. They have epicormic shoots. And we have the potential to lose the canopy on our street trees within downtown Hamilton in this section. So the cause is the base of the trunk has been cut by the metal grates and or the sidewalk squares because they're be planted really, really close to them. The impacts is that we have the epicormic shoots on the trunk, which is an indicator of stress. We also have the integrity of the trees has been damaged. This creates a passageway for pathogens and pests. We also have an increased chance of mortality, obviously, because we have damaged street trees. So I have a whole series of pictures here. So you can see the metal grates right against the tree, and because they have been left there and the tree has been growing into the grate, this causes a lot of problems. Here's another one. You can see At the base, there's some shooting happening, as well as the little buds on the left there. That's epicormic shoots, which is a sign of stress. Here's another one where the tree is just starting to go into the grate. I guess the Public Works must have witnessed this before because these are shoots that have been severed, but obviously there's new shoots growing because the tree is still under stress. Clearly the trees are dying because of this, which is open. Here's another one, lots of epicormic shoots. Here's one where the tree is growing right into the grate again. This one's right adjacent to it. Same picture. Here we also have some damage to city property because of that with the grates, as well as you can see the lesions that are happening at the base as well. Here's another one, the same picture with the tree at a distance. This one was a new tree that has just obviously been planted as well to replace a dead one. However, you can see at the base the grate is still there, so likely the same thing will happen again. This is an ash tree that is there. Lots of epicormic shoots and suckering at the base, which is an indicator of stress. This was taken just yesterday. You can see a little bit more healthy of the trees. I believe they were a cultivar of black locust in the back. This one's that ash. You can see it has no canopy where we should have one right about now. Here's another shot of looking towards Jackson Square and the Sheridan building. There's Scots pine, which are other invasive species, and some of those locusts at the front. Here's another photo, and I have these ones just to orient yourself, looking west on King Street. Here's another, this one was a locust, I believe, with the canopy has been reduced. Here's that same other tree looking just at a different angle with no canopy at all. Here's a different tree, but again, there's dieback in the canopy. Here's just the landscape shot of that, looking towards, the building that's being built right there. Again, looking towards Jackson Square. So the sampling that I did, there was a total of 15 trees between Main and King. 8 or 53% of these had damage. And then going north towards Caroline Street, 17 trees I counted, and 65% of these had damage. So the implications are the dead trees will obviously need to be replaced at some point when they die, and that's going to cost money. We also have damaged sidewalk squares that will need replacing as well, again costing money to the City of Hamilton. So the opportunities that I see for this, my whole idea for presenting to you was to show you that that this is happening, but I love seeing some of the trees obviously in front are more healthy, and that's a much nicer aesthetic than having a lot of damaged trees in our area. So one suggestion, or a few suggestions I had were to remove the metal grates. This would allow space for the trees to grow more healthy. Remove the unhealthy trees, and I think we could have an opportunity to place with more native species. We can monitor these trees and also maybe conduct a more tree health assessment to areas further than what I went to look at. Why we can monitor and maintain? Well, we have aesthetics and also cooling effects to keep a canopy, tree canopy in the urban area. I also found that this contributes to the goals of Vision 2020, as well as the Urban Hamilton Official Plan and some areas of the Hamilton Natural Areas Heritage Strategy. And overall, more trees downtown contributes to improved air quality. So opportunities, we can conduct that further assessment of the street trees within City Hamilton to see if this is happening elsewhere. Possibility to review the Hamilton Street Tree Planting Program to remove exotics off that list and put exclusively natives. We can also have an opportunity to possibly plant meadow plantings where appropriate instead of trees if this may be a factor of the sites, and if it's a tree specific thing, that maybe a meadow plantings with more wildflowers and grasses would be more appropriate. So why we can plant native species? Well, public education on native species. There's lots of people who do have an affinity towards them. They also provide habitat for native wildlife and a food source. They're more suitable to our local climate than exotic species and therefore require low maintenance. So to summarize, the trees are damaged due to the metal grates and sidewalks. Their injuries led to stress and an increased probability of disease or mortality. The dead trees, they decrease the urban canopy, aesthetics, air quality, and our value. Current planting method is damaging the sidewalks and costing money. If we remove the grates, replant with native species, and give the trunk space to maintain healthy trees, I feel this is a better opportunity. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that very in-depth presentation, Nicholas. And I do have a question from Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Nicholas, nice to meet you, and you've obviously spent a fair bit of time researching and putting that presentation together. Thank you. I'm going to take from what you're saying that overall you're pleased and happy that the downtown of our city has a treescaping to break up, if you will, just one concrete type of look. Mr. Chairman, through to Nicholas, I want to make sure we're on the same page in that regard.
Yes, that's correct. I love seeing the trees. I think we do have lots, but I guess the point I'm trying to get across is we have trees, but without maintaining them correctly, they're just going to be dying. So I feel we have an opportunity to make sure that we do keep these healthy, and that would be to look at the way we're planting and to keep them there.
Okay, so it's the maintenance of the types we're planting,
yes,
and maybe in a more a safer type of environment for the trees in terms of how we're planting them, inserting them along the streetscape there.
Correct, yes.
Okay, and I guess at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, when we have quorum, I would not only want to receive Nicholas's presentation, but refer to our manager of forestry, Mike McNamara, for comments and possibly a report back on your suggestions. Thanks, Nicholas. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions for Nicholas? Hearing none. Nicholas, thanks again for your presentation today.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that, and we will receive it as soon as we regain quorum. So thank you. And Councillor Jackson, I will come back to you, or Councillor Ferguson will if he's back in the chair, for a motion to direct staff to come back with information that seeks to address the issues that Nicholas has raised this morning. Next on our agenda is 6.3. It's a delegation request from Bruce Panagapko respecting the addition of more bike lanes. Our final delegation is supposed to attend. Bruce, you're here today. Thank you, sir. Come on down.
Good morning. My name is Bruce Panagapko. I'm 66 years old and I operate a medical scooter. I live down in the Barton and Wentworth area. What I'm suggesting is more accessibility, more bicycle lanes, possibly for people with scooters. A lot of people have them for mobility, but they can't walk. My problem, I have degenerative discs and arthritis in my neck. Riding my scooter on the sidewalks, all the cracks around the city, these sidewalks are so rough that I can't take the pain. So I do all of my driving on the roadways. Most of the time it's on the back roads so that I'm not interfering with traffic flow. And with the newer scooters, they're a lot bigger than they used to be, and I can't get on some of the buses. The brand new ones I can get on the Benda buses, but the other ones I have a lot of problems, so I don't. My scooter is my lifeline. I have to go to the cancer center up on the mountain once a year. I drive the Jolly Cut, I go up the bicycle path, and then along, I come back down the same way. My doctor is in Stoney Creek on Centennial Parkway. When I go with my scooter, I take the roadway as much as I can because it doesn't matter which way you go. The cracks in the sidewalks, and a lot of the sidewalks in the older parts don't have ramps where you can go down, and it makes it hard. In the wintertime, people on corners, when they shovel their sidewalks, they don't shovel an access passage so that you can get through. This past winter, I had to go to my doctor. He's, like I said, in Stoney Creek. The overpass over the Red Hill Valley Parkway on Queenston Road, when the city cleared the snow, they cleared the snow off the road and put it right onto the sidewalk. So I had to go onto the road there to get around. I contacted the city and they said that they would look into it. But I really think if we had bicycle lanes and more access, because there's more and more people using scooters in the city. I've been down to Central Hamilton Police Station. The Department of Highways definition for our scooters is that they're designed for sidewalks. But I was told by the city police, if you have a legitimate reason, excuse me, for not using the sidewalk, you can use the roadway. Now, I have one of those construction vests with a big X so people can see me. I think that's all I have for now, but I would really like to see more access for scooters on the roadways.
Thank you for that, Bruce. Members of the committee, Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Bruce. Nice to meet you, and thanks for coming in. You're educating me a little bit. I thought scooters were supposed to stay on sidewalks, unlike bikes that should be on the road and in bike lanes and not be on sidewalks. Are you saying scooters are legally allowed to be on the road as well, Mr. Chairman, through you to Bruce?
Through the chair, I was, according to the Highway Traffic Act, they are designed for the sidewalk. If you have a legitimate reason for that you cannot use the sidewalk, then you can use the road. That's what the city police told me, according to the Highway Traffic Act.
Okay.
Now, in my travels, I've had a lot of cruisers pass me on main streets, Barton Street, King Street, and they don't seem to have a problem with it. I've never been pulled over and stopped and asked me why I'm on the road.
Okay. Because you've got to be probably the first person I've met, Bruce, that would regularly say you from time to time you'll use the roadway. I know a number of my constituents that have scooters, obviously just to cross from one side of the road through the city sidewalk ramp of the intersection to their side, obviously using the road, but otherwise they're using sidewalks. So you're almost the first one I would say that I'm aware of that doesn't hesitate, if you will, to use the roadway.
Well, another thing, like I said, my scooter is my lifeline. I have a couple trailers that I built that I pull behind it. I've hauled lumber from Lowe's out on Woodward Avenue to my home on Barton Street behind my scooter. I can't take the sidewalk with that. I do take the roadway. So it's my lifeline, so.
Well, in terms of, Mr. Chairman, more bike lanes, I mean, that's part of the master cycling plan, and wherever we built them, when we're going to build them, that's all going to be part of budget and the cycling plan, Bruce. But in terms of yourself and wanting more bike lanes just so that scooters could use them, I wonder if I suppose we'd look for a reaction from our cycling community as well to see whether that would be a favorable or unfavorable reaction from the cycling community for lanes that are designated for bicycle lanes as well. So kind of opens up another question. But thank you, Bruce. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Members of the committee, any other questions for Bruce? Bruce, thanks again for your presentation today.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you raising those concerns, and I'll come back to Councillor Jackson again at a later date once we regain quorum, and maybe we'll undertake the referral that he suggested there to the cycling community as well. And sir, are you aware of the plans that we have for the annual plans that we have for the bike lane implementation?
No, I'm not very computer literate, so
Okay.
I have a hard time researching.
So maybe what we'll do is we'll get a copy of those plans for you, and you can be aware of the short, medium, and long-term goals that we have for cycling initiatives in our community.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks again, sir. So I'm going to come back to the committee now that Councillor Ferguson has rejoined us. 6.1 was the delegation from the conservation authorities. Move to receive that report. Moved by Pasuta, seconded by Jackson. All those in favour, that carries. Thank you. 6.2 was Nicholas Schwetz regarding the tree health in downtown Hamilton. Councillor Jackson, you were going to refer that to staff for a report
Yes,
back?
referred to staff. I guess it would be Director Craig Murdoch or Director Rob Norman, along with Manager Mike McNamara, for a report back on what was suggested about the better maintenance of and different types of species tree planting along the streetscape downtown.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Merulla. All those in favour? Carries. Thank you. And then we need a receipt of Bruce's past delegation there for 6.3. Moved by Pasuta, seconded by Jackson. All those in favour? Carry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Jackson.
And Mr. Chairman, with the condition, let's get a comment, I would suggest, from the cycling community on his suggestion for more motorized scooters to be able to use bicycle lanes.
All
Thank
in
you.
favour? Carries. Thank you. And on to 7.1.
7.1 is the waste collection service update. So is Brian Scheinel doing the presentation today? You're doing it? Maybe, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. You just introduce yourself. Over fellow. Okay.
Well, thank you for allowing me to present today an overview of Hamilton's waste collection system. We have a long history of providing waste collection services in our community. As you can tell, these are a few of the photographs of waste collection vehicles that used to patrol our streets. So even though we've gone from horse and buggy to the 21st century, essentially our core services remain the same. We pass by residential households, we pick up waste materials, and we safely transport those materials to waste processing sites or to disposal facilities. Households generate a wide range of products, including containers, papers, food waste, yard waste, and other miscellaneous garbage. And over the years, we've completed a number of different waste composition studies, and we've found that over 80% of household waste can be diverted through our Blue Box program and organic waste collection services. Early in 2012, Council approved a new waste collection service level after reviewing a number of different options. And so these services took effect in April of 2013. And our new services include the weekly green cart program, weekly yard waste collection of unlimited quantities, a weekly one container limit for garbage plus a trash tag system, weekly call-in bulk waste of 4 items per residential household, as well as 2-stream recycling collection provided on a weekly basis. Our services are provided in part by the Public Works Department as well as our contractor GFL Environmental Inc. About half of the city is collected by the Public Works Department for the collection of organic waste, yard waste, bulk waste and garbage, and the other half of the city is contracted to GFL. The recycling program, as well as our front-end bin collection services, are both 100% contracted to GFL. Our new programs offers enhanced services which weren't previously available to residents. And so far we've found very good uptake from residents, particularly for the weekly yard waste collection as well as the weekly call and bulk service. We review our tonnages on a regular basis. And so here this slide shows a snapshot of the quantity of materials collected through our diversion programs, including the Blue Box program, Green Cart program, and yard waste collection service. The data compares the quantity collected between the first 4 months of this year compared to the same period last year. So this year we've noticed that there's been a 1% increase in the Blue Box capture, which is good, but we would like to see it higher. Leaf and yard waste collection was about 60% higher this year compared to last year, and that's because of the weekly service that we started in April. From the preliminary data from May, we've actually captured about double of what the quantity was from last year. However, green cart tonnage is about 10% less this year, and this is likely because a lot of the yard waste which was previously collected in the green cart service is now being collected separately. Also, seasonality does play a factor in organic waste collection services, where last year we had a very warm spring season and people were setting out more yard waste earlier on compared to this year, being that it was a little bit cooler. Overall, the waste disposed, including bulk waste and garbage, has increased this year by about 4%. And that's likely because of the new service for the bulk collection, as well as offering the trash tags. And some people have started using the trash tags as soon as they receive them in April. We've received quite a significant number of calls for the bulk waste program. So last year, from January to April, we had about 7,600 calls, compared to this year, which is about 11,500. Of that number, about 4,800 was received in April, and we find that it's about the same for May, about 4,800 calls. Typically throughout the year, we'll see peaks and valleys in terms of the quantity of garbage that's set out, and typically from April and May and October and November, we'll see the spikes during the year where more people are setting out more garbage. So with the service changes, we introduced a trash tag system which started on April 1st. Now the trash tag system is being offered in lieu of amnesty weeks, which we had in previous years. Trash tags provide residents with increased flexibility to set out additional garbage when required during the year, as opposed to having to wait for a prescribed amnesty week. Residential properties are allowed to have 26 trash tags, and 12 of those trash tags were included in the Garbage and Recycling Guide, which was mailed to households in March and April this year. Those who require the additional 14 tags can make a request either by contacting the city through the Customer Contact Center, visiting a municipal service center, or completing a form online. And so up to mid-May, there was about 2,400 requests, 950 of those through the call center or in person, and about 1,500 from our online form. We are planning to provide a follow-up report to Council to provide an overview of the performance of the trash tag system later this year. However, so far we've found pretty good uptake from residents in terms of the use of the trash tags, and they find it's very convenient so that they can set out garbage when they require. As part of our services, we have a special consideration policy, and this allows for an increased container limit for households with unique circumstances. And these circumstances include medical conditions, families with young children, home daycares, and agricultural properties. We made a few changes to our service this year to allow families with 2 children under the age of 4 to qualify for the policy, as opposed to 3 children under the age of 5. Those who require special consideration are required to submit an application form either through the city's website or they can mail it in. If a household requires to have special consideration on an ongoing basis, they need to reapply each year because circumstances in the household may change from year to year. Also, as part of the service changes this year, those who require special consideration will receive 104 trash tags. And so that's the equivalent to setting out 3 containers of garbage per week. So the first container does not require a trash tag, but anything on top of that will require a tag. So over the years, we've seen a fluctuation in the terms of the number of applicants that we've received. So in 2009, we had about 1,000 applicants. This went up in 2010, dropped in 2011 and 12, and it's increased this year. And we feel that the increase this year is attributed to families applying for the new policy, which may not have qualified for the policy in past years. But we have also noticed a number of people who have applied previously and have decided to renew this year. So overall, out of all the applicants that we've received, about 60% are for the medical category, followed by the family category at about 32%. So with our collection service changes, we've also introduced new types of waste diversion containers. So we'll be phasing in smaller green carts for residential properties, and these containers are about 40 liters in size. Now, the point of having the smaller container is to encourage the use of the container for food waste and to help increase the yard waste diversion by allowing people to use paper yard waste bags or open-top rigid reusable containers. We'll still continue with having large green carts in our community, where we're trying to focus those on multi-residential apartment buildings, commercial properties, and municipal facilities. Our services this year also include introduction of a larger size blue box, which is 83 liters in size, or about 22 gallons. The previous size blue boxes that we've used in this community is about 16 gallons. Overall, we've noticed that a number of municipalities across Ontario are going towards the 22-gallon box, and the main reason is to encourage residents to set out additional recyclable materials. Also new this year, residents can use their own larger-sized recycling container, which could be up to 135 liters. Typically, these containers are available in retail stores. They may have lids, they may have wheels. And this is now possible with the new types of recycling vehicles being used by GFL. In addition to our curbside programs, the Operations Division operates the Hamilton Downtown Cleanliness Program. And the core area that's serviced by this program is bounded by Hunter Street to Murray Street, Bay Street to Wellington Street. So the services provided through this program include manual litter collection, which is provided daily, emptying of litter containers plus public space containers, servicing cigarette receptacles, sidewalk power sweeping, sidewalk power washing, maintenance of poster kiosks, as well as curbside collection services. And our road section also participates in the program by assisting us with providing mechanical roadway sweeping, as well as road and sidewalk maintenance. So in conclusion, we can safely say that our business is picking up.
Thank Thanks, Raphael, and I'm sorry about the invitation. My scripting notes said it was going to be Brian, but it was a great presentation. First questions from Councillor Collins.
Yeah, just on the blue box with the lid issue, I know that's one that I'd asked about a couple of years ago, and staff were pursuing it, and now it's part of our policy that we permit them to be used, different shapes and forms. And I'm wondering whether we'd be in a position at some point in time to offer those as the replacement for the 3 or 4 that residents may have out currently. I have 4, on average, 4 boxes that I put out with my 2 young kids and my wife and I every week. And I think, if memory serves me right, those boxes are about, they're just over $5, I think it cost us to purchase. Is that correct? Is that still the going? Okay. So I'm not certain how that compares to one box, with the taller one that you illustrated there with the lid. Do we know what the cost is for a product along those lines?
Through Mr. Chair, typically at retail locations, those larger size recycling containers range from about $25 to about $30. I'm not sure how much they would cost in terms of doing a bulk order. However, we're also looking at what is the cost of providing a lid for the blue boxes. But again, there can be a challenge with that, because if people have multiple blue boxes, then they would require multiple lids. So we are looking at what options are there for the city in terms of the waste diversion containers that we supply to the public.
And is there a way for us to understand what the cost would be? Is that simple calling around to local suppliers or suppliers that are in that business to understand if there is a cost benefit to the city to replace 3 or 4 boxes that are curbside with one stand-up container similar to the green cart system?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we can contact those companies that offer those containers. There is a bit of a challenge, though, with certain households within our community, because in some cases they may not have the space to store another large container, particularly if they don't have a garage, versus if they have blue boxes, the blue boxes can stack one inside the other, so they can just pull them out when they need to set them out at curbside.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in the reverse situation. I don't have a garage, and I have 4 boxes that are sitting outside, and so for me to consolidate those into one would be certainly more beneficial and a better use of space in my own rear yard. So I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you need direction for that, but if there's an opportunity for staff to go out and find out whether there is an opportunity for us to start look at offering those types of containers to save money, that's the goal. Again, for those families that have 3 or 4, and I've seen people with more than I'm putting at the curb. So there may be a cost-benefit analysis we can undertake to certainly understand if we secure a better price privately than one would pay at Canadian Tire or Lowe's or whatever. I'd certainly be interested in understanding what that cost is.
Or you can take it as direction. Would you like to
Let's do that? Yep.
Direction's okay?
Yep.
Okay, good, Raphael. You take that as direction then to report back to a future Public Works meeting then on the cost of getting larger blue bins with roofs on them, lids on them. Okay. I don't have any other speakers. One question though, Raphael, is we put out 12 tags with the calendar, and residents can pick up to 13 more if they go to a municipal service center here at City Hall and pick up another 13. Have you had much uptake on those extra tags so far?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so far we've had about 2,400 calls as of mid-May.
You can pick your microphone up. We can barely hear you.
Yes. Through you, Mr. Chair, the uptake has been favorable so far. So in terms of the number of requests through the customer contact center and through the service centers, most of the requests are coming in through the online form, because we find that people are computer savvy and it's available 24 hours a day. The least number of requests are through the municipal service center, because it does take time for somebody to go out and go to a service center to pick up the trash tags. In terms of distribution of the tags, generally when somebody makes a request, they can receive their tags like within a week or 2. So it's a fairly quick turnaround time.
Thank you. Councillor Pasuta.
Thank you, Chairman Ferguson. Seems a lot of my residents didn't get tags. When you talk to them, they didn't get tags because of the address, whether it's Pushlands, whether it's Cambridge, whether it's Campbellville, including myself. I never got any tags. Are we still looking into the way we've distributed the tags? Like, we know where to send the tax bills. How come we don't know where to send the garbage tags?
Rafaela? Any comment? I know a lot of us have had complaints that the post office either didn't distribute them, or they show up at your door and they go instantly to the blue box, or you have a no flyer policy so they don't come. Is there any update on how we can improve that?
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, there were some challenges with delivering the tags, particularly along the rural areas with residents that have the Puslenge address. We tried to be very proactive with them. In a couple of cases, we actually hand-delivered in certain areas. It is a bit of a challenge with the type of distribution system that we're using with Canada Post, where it's non-addressed versus the tax bills are addressed. Distributing them addressed versus non-addressed means that there would be a cost implication, so we took a look at what those costs would be. Historically, when we've tried to deliver with the non-addressed, we actually did some areas where we did hand delivery.
Sir?
So, Mr. Chairman, what did it cost us to have them distributed by Canada Post then, non-addressed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, was about $105,000 when we considered the cost of the garbage tags plus the guide plus the envelopes.
So sorry for belaboring this, so per household, what would that have cost us? Garbage tags in the calendar.
Done that arithmetic, divided the total cost by the number of households?
Sorry, unfortunately, I can't do the math off the top of my head, but it's less than $1 per household.
It's okay.
Maybe we should consider, have you given consideration in future years to include those tags in the tax bill that goes out in February?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can discuss that option with the taxation division. I've heard that there is a little bit of hesitation in terms of what goes in with the tax bill, because there's a number of other departments which would like to have their information included with the tax bill. But as I mentioned in the presentation, we are planning to come back to committee with an overview of the trash tag system, including factors with respect to distributing the tags in future years.
Okay. So, Councillor Pursuit, you may want to consider a resolution then to ask staff to report back about including these tags in with the tax bill to save $120,000 plus ensure it gets in everybody's home. I have Councillor Merulla next.
Just quickly, with respect to the Canada Post issue, just as an FYI, I've had numerous problems with them since 2000 in getting full compliance of the delivery. And the bottom line is this: if you don't put a stamp on it, we're not going to deliver them to 100% of the people we're delivering them to. When we do mass mailings like that, you're looking at probably anywhere from 40 to 60% compliance, which is, in my opinion, fraudulent. I brought this up publicly for 12 years. I wrote the minister, because they are a Crown corporation, had press conferences. I've basically given up on them. I rely now on volunteers and contract individuals to get the job done. It basically is what they're basically are doing. From my perspective, is criminal. We are paying for a service, and they are not delivering it, which in my eyes, and in the eyes of the law, is fraud. Having said that, I think we should have been aware of that. Unless you put a stamp on it, don't count on it being delivered. Thank you.
Okay, I have no other speakers. So motion to receive, Collins, seconded by Bruno. All in favor? Carried. Did you want to put a motion to ask staff to report back on that, Councillor Pursuit?
Yes, I'd like to move that motion as we discussed.
The staff report back on putting the trash tags in the February tax bill.
With the bill.
And other options, councillors.
And other possible options to resolve the problem.
Including a stamp.
Right, well, okay. And other options should cover it all. But we're sending a bill to everybody's home in February. Just drop these 12 tags in it. You save $120,000 that we spent in the post office this year.
Councillor Collins made a good point that it goes to the actual owner and not the tenant. So there's going to have to be a way to deal with that component as well.
So your motion is to consider putting the tax bill and other options. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Jackson. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Rafael. So we're on to discussion items. Permanent closure and sale of a portion of the road allowance on Kingsview Drive and Stoney Creek. Is there any discussion on 8.1? Moved by Jackson, seconded by Pasuda. All in favor? Carried. 8.2, the D.A.R.T.S 2012 deficit funding. Any discussion on this? Yeah, can you take the chair then? One thing that struck me when I read this report, Mr. Chairman, is on page 2 of the report, there's a matrix that outlines the service levels. There's the issue that they need an additional $50,000 in order to break even on the 2012 taxation year. But the more alarming part for me is that they actually took 7,302 less trips than they budgeted and overspent by $50,000. But the real scary statistic is that their complaints went from 360, which was the budget, to 1,390. So in my mind, this is a performance issue that we need to get our head around, understand why. There was a big push last year to turn the dispatch of D.A.R.T.S away from HSR, send it over to D.A.R.T staff so they have better control and can provide better service. But the ultimate test here is that when complaints go up by 4 times, almost 4 times, that's not an improvement in service. I'll turn to my colleagues to see if there are any other comments on it, but is someone here who can talk to this report? I see, thank you. George, so I'll take the chair back. I just made those comments and see what other members of the committee may have to say on this issue, then we can ask George for some comments.
And I have Councillor Merulla next on the list.
Councillor Merulla.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson, Mr. Chairman. Having heard what you said, and I concur with you, and over the last 6 years, I believe, we went through an entire process where D.A.R.T.S is a direct result of not only the complaints but the deficit issues. I felt it was incumbent that we review the entire operation from top to bottom. We went through an entire operational review of D.A.R.T.S. Options were provided, and the best option, in my opinion, at that time, would have been to bring the entire operation in-house and have it as an extension of Public Works, and by that extension, the HSR. Unfortunately, I didn't get support for that endeavor, and now we're faced with this issue where, because there was conflict between D.A.R.T.S and their belief or assertion that the city was responsible for the incompetence or the ineptitude that they claimed existed as a result of the dispatching component. So rather than taking responsibility or the bull by the horns and bringing it all in-house and basically taking full responsibility like we did with our water and sewer treatment plant, and we all know how successful that is, we decided to actually provide D.A.R.T.S with even more responsibility and removing ourselves even more from the equation. And I think what we see today is really the outcome of not having taken the bull by the horns at that time. That was then, this is now, and I'm glad that we are coming to an understanding of the importance of this issue and of trying to maintain or even obtain more control over the operation itself. Over and above the deficit issue, I think operationally this is one of those services that firstly I believe should be provincially funded. As many know, D.A.R.T.S provides transportation to provincially mandated programs. I believe it's in and around 70%. Hospital visits and other medical and educational needs. And again, this is another issue that falls on top of our backs at the municipal level. Having said all of that, we went through all of this entire process. I chaired the entire operational review. We did, I think, move the yardsticks to some degree, but for the most part, I think we did not succeed in doing what it was in the best interest of the taxpayer, and that is to not continue the contract, but to bring it all in-house. We are where we are today, and I think we can still review the existing relationship so that we can find more efficiencies. But I can assure you that based on what we know, where we are today, we need to be in a position where it's fully in-house rather than outside or outsourced. So that's my ultimate goal, and I'm glad to see, Councillor Ferguson, that you agree, and I think that's where we should start moving this ball. So at the appropriate time, I have no problem initiating this whole process all over again, because it was a 3 or 4 year process at that time. and I have a lot of energy, so I'd be more than willing to start it all over again. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Jackson, it may be appropriate to go to George. I see he's in the audience, George Provac. George, any comments on the matrix that shows that they went $50,000 over budget, took 7,300 less trips, but complaints went up from 360 to 1,360? Is there something logical that we're missing here?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Specialized Transit's been in a transition since we did shift the reservation function over to D.A.R.T.S. They also went off the city's IT and phone network system onto their own private contractor, and a substantial amount of the complaints initially came through with passengers not being able to access their phone system. They had a lot of significant complaints and deficiencies with it. That's now tailored off in that the phone system and their IT support is working fine. What we're finding now is that they are producing greater number of trips, so they're exceeding the contract for 2013, and they're increased their performance measures. The problem is they're having a hard time balancing the actual demand to the service, and we're getting service-related complaints about trips being late, people being on board too long. I know that D.A.R.T.S is looking, we've increased our trip counts because we've put in a new eligibility. We're first in Canada to move to a functional cognitive evaluation to determine someone's ability to use specialized transit. We are also putting in MDTs, mobile data terminals. They should be installed on all D.A.R.T.S and VETS vehicles within a month. So we should see some efficiencies come back regarding the day of service and how they dispatch their vehicles and so on. But initially, the complaints, the increased significant number of complaints that came through had to deal with their phone support and their IT support.
These were processes they put in place when they took the operation over, and you're saying it didn't function properly when they went live with it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. They have fixed those issues, but now we're finding that the complaints are coming back based on their ability, the service itself.
Okay, Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to piggyback on Councillor Merulla's point. And, George, I don't think you were in your position you're in now about 3-4 years ago during the last term of council. Correct me if my memory's wrong. But if I recall, Mr. Chairman, and the majority of council, last term of council, before I get to my question to George, if I recall, the majority went with this, staying with this, I'll call the hybrid of D.A.R.T.S and ATS, while giving more responsibilities over to D.A.R.T.S, like scheduling, delivery, things like that, I think, while maintaining just intake of calls by ATS. I think the majority stayed with the hybrid primarily because there was some huge cost factor that staff presented to bring it all in-house. I think up front would have been X amount, if I recall, it was a big number. And I think that pretty well caused the majority of council to say, look, for that kind of number to bring it in-house, maybe we'll look at it another time. But, Mr. Chairman, what I do recall, too, through to George, is I thought that experiment, to continue the experiment of the hybrid, was about a 3 or 4 year pilot while giving more responsibilities to D.A.R.T.S, scheduling, and then reporting back in this new term of council on when that period ended and how things are going. Mr. Chairman, through to George, I know again, George, you're fairly new to your position if I recall, but any comment on that, George, through you, Mr. Chairman? George?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't the manager at the time, but I was a part of the evaluation committee and the review of the governance model, so I was involved in all the work that was undertaken.
My apologies, okay.
That's okay. But remembering back, I don't believe what was decided was we had an operation that was split where ATS City would take reservations and then D.A.R.T.S would work with those reservations and schedule trips and so on.
Correct.
We moved away from that to give more autonomy to D.A.R.T.S to allow them and the passenger one source. The city now handles the contract, performance the contracts. We work with AODA legislation. We take complaints. D.A.R.T.S has the autonomy now. They take the bookings, they schedule the trips, they have all the accountability.
Correct.
I don't remember a recommendation to come back. I can check into the governance review and recommendation to see if there was a recommendation to come back in 3 years to reevaluate or to measure their performance. But they just took this over in June of last year.
Okay.
So it's been less than a year since D.A.R.T.S has taken over reservations.
Okay, George, thank you. I appreciate that further feedback and information. So, Mr. Chairman, maybe just through clerks and the minutes of last term, if it wasn't formalized to bring back after a certain period of time, 3 years seems to stick out in my mind, to come back with the greater responsibilities handed over to D.A.R.T.S and report back. If that wasn't the case formally, then I think then, you know what, the intent, I believe, was there, the spirit of that was there, at least for guys like me. It was, okay, I remember Don Hall and Mark Mindorf, et cetera, providing their information on continuing with the hybrid, I'll call it. And if it wasn't formalized, Mr. Chairman, then I think it would be timely, even though it's just been about a year now, George, you're saying we've handed over scheduling. I think it would be timely to have another good full discussion, Mr. Chairman, at this table in terms of the D.A.R.T.S, ATS, City of Hamilton funding, seems like annual deficit requests that they bring forward. If I recall now, this one seems to be one of the smaller ones, but in the past I recall around $300,000-$400,000 additional dollars needed to help the deficit at D.A.R.T.S. So if it wasn't formalized, Mr. Chairman, I think in the next few weeks, months, I think in the timing of a good debate on this matter would be appropriate. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, George.
Well, thank you. And Councillor Merulla.
Just on that point, and I appreciate Councillor Jackson's comments. As I mentioned earlier, I have no problem reestablishing a committee to deal with this particular issue from an oversight perspective. So at the appropriate time, I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Jackson, and that we'll ask Council or those who want to be involved to be part of the process at the appropriate time as well.
Okay, so it's just to establish a committee to drill down more on these results.
On the oversight, as an operational review, as well as potential future options to mitigate the existing actual problems that we've been faced with D.A.R.T.S.
Okay, so moved by Merulla, second by Jackson. Mr.
There is an operational review subcommittee that all operational reviews would go to that exists already. But also, if you wanted to form a new committee, the correct way we just need to get staff to report back to create a new committee.
The original operational review or committee was established when we went after licensing issues back in 2005. But we did have a separate subcommittee to deal with D.A.R.T.S specifically on the RFP process that I don't think we ever got rid of, and it was outside of that operational review.
So just to be clear about this, do you want to form a separate committee for this, or do you want to go with the operational review? Separate committee?
Separate committee.
And be members of the Public Works Committee or any member of Council?
Any member of Council.
Okay.
That's exactly what we
So the clerk would, if it gets approved by Council, would petition members of Council for anyone who would like to sit on this?
That's correct.
Yeah, and we'd just in terms of process, within the procedural bylaw, it says that to create one, we have to get a report from staff with the terms of reference.
So be it. But we could always refer back to our previous terms of reference, Mr. Chairman, which we would have had from, I believe it would have been 2 terms ago or last term. I'm not quite sure now.
Well, you heard George say that we did this June last year.
No, but the subcommittee through you, Mr. Chairman.
George?
Yeah, I believe it was through you, Mr. Chair. I believe it was last term.
Okay, so we would have the existing terms of reference of that subcommittee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can look for it. Yep.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Councilor, would you take the chair just for 1 second? I support this motion. When you go over by $50,000 while moving 7,000 less trips and the complaints going up 4 times, that's unacceptable key performance indicators. And so we have a duty to the people who use the service to get our heads around this. So I appreciate the fact of going back to a committee of council to understand this better, understand the trends and what we can do to fix this. So I'll take the chair back. And any other discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor?
Carried.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Any motion? Okay, move to the report. We have to fund the $50,000. Second by Councillor Jackson. All in favor? Carried. 8.3. Mr. Clerk, you're suggesting that maybe we defer this until Councillor McCaddy's here? A motion to defer that?
8.3 was referred back by Councillor Whitehead for us from Council.
Move to defer. Collins, Merulla, all in favor? Carried. Motions. Councillor Merulla, are you going to take this for Councillor McCaddy? Councillor Collins, okay.
It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Merulla, that staff be directed to install stop controls at the following intersections. They're all at McNab, Barton, Colburn, Ferry, Macaulay, Strawn, Stewart. And part B is that the appropriate amending bylaw be passed.
Discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Couple notices of motion? Okay, yeah, Councillor, you want to waive the rules then? Is that what you're suggesting?
Move to waive the rules, yeah.
What's it about, just so we don't...
Stop signs, 2 stop signs.
Okay, motion to waive the rules about 2 stop signs, second by Collins, all in favor? Carried. Please, your motion?
On the first one, it's whereas a request by community and subsequent assessment did not include an all-way stop control was warranted at the school zone intersection of Monterey Avenue and Houghton Avenue South, and whereas upon my requesting a petition to gauge support of an all-way stop and school zone intersection at the school zone intersection of Monterey Avenue and Houghton Avenue South, and whereas a petition has been submitted to me with over 200 signatures in support of an all-way stop control at the school intersection of Monterey Avenue and Houghton Avenue South, therefore be it resolved that an all-way stop control be installed at the all-way stop control at the school zone intersection of Monterey Avenue and Houghton Avenue South, and I've submitted the petition as well.
Okay, discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Carried.
Opposed? Carries. You have a second one, Councillor Merulla?
I do indeed, Mr. Chairman, and it's whereas a request by community and subsequent assessment by staff did not conclude an all-way stop control was warranted at the intersection of Maple and Tuxedo Avenue South, and whereas upon my requesting a petition to assess community support of an all-way stop at the intersection of Maple and Tuxedo Avenue South, and whereas a petition has been submitted to me in support of an all-way stop control at the intersection of Maple and Tuxedo Avenue South, therefore be it resolved that an all-way stop be installed at the corner of Tuxedo Avenue South and Maple.
On it? All in favor? Carried. Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Collins, you have another one?
I do. It's from Councillor Farr, and his is time sensitive. He would like it at this meeting rather than waiting for the next Public Works meeting. As I understand it from Councillor Farr, staff are supportive of the stop sign installation, and it's for a four-way stop to be installed at the intersection of Bold Street and McNab Street South. So I need to move the rules. And
Second by Merulla, all in favor?
And then on the motion itself.
On the motion itself. Any input from staff on this one? You said Jason's not here. No? Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? And motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to outstanding business list. We have one item to remove from the OBL. Can I have a motion to remove King Street westbound lane? Moved by Collins, seconded by Pasuta. Discussion on it? All in favor? Then that's motion carried. Councillor Pasuta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Ferguson. Item P, and it's a petition from the residents of Oatfield Road North in Dundas, and is referred back to council, actually. That is being done. I think Gary Moore can actually say that's the division between Councillor Partridge's and mine, and we found funds to redo that road this summer. So I have a report on it.
You're directing that question or comment to who?
To Gary. We had worked on this together, so we could take that up, can we not, Gary? Through you, Mr. Chairman?
Item B.
That's through you, Mr. Chair. That issue is being dealt with by road ops.
Okay, second, remove it from the outstanding business list. Discussion on it, all in favor? Any other items of general information? Seeing none, motion to adjourn. Moved by Collins, second by Jackson, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.